Okay, we're taking a look at Luke 5:12 to 13. We want to read the passages that the author expects us to be familiar with. And there are not any quoted prophecies or clear allusions to stories in the Old Testament, so there's nothing to do for that. But I mention it still here, even though we've been in a section in Luke where this has not been relevant. I mention it just to emphasize that you don't want to forget this step. When you do hit those passages where this is pertinent, you want to do that. It's going to serve you well to have that background in mind that the author expects you to have when you come to the text. First, let's read through the text and I'll point out the observations I made. So it says in verse 12, while he, Jesus, was in one of the cities, there came a man full of leprosy. And when he saw Jesus, he fell on his face and begged him, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. So 3 of the observations or questions that I wrote down would be, first of all, regarding this word begged. It says he fell on his face and he begged him. And I was just interested more in that word. I'm wondering what connotations and so forth I should be gleaning from the word begged. Secondly, I am wondering more about leprosy in general. I know that there are things in the Old Testament law about leprosy making you unclean. Obviously, that's referred to here, but then also the reality of not touching somebody who is unclean lest you become unclean yourself. And we can see here that Jesus touched him. So what am I supposed to know about that? We are going to want to answer some of those questions and understand that better. Thirdly, it says that the leprosy left him. And as I slowed down, I found that a little peculiar. Generally, we don't talk about a disease leaving you. Does that imply something more, that there's a demonic aspect to that leprosy or not? What should we make of this word left? Is there anything we can glean from the original language word behind it? So that brings us to step 3. And with our focus this lesson on searching the original text, we're going to focus our time as well on that. But before we get there, let me just point out a couple insights gleaned from the other aspects of step 3 in our process. So with regard to cross-references, I thought it was very interesting and significant, this cross-reference referring to the words, if you will, in the request from the leper, particularly in regard to this second cross-reference. You can see it's in square brackets, so this is a topical cross-reference. And it says, and it has often cast him into the fire, so speaking about a demon, and into water. This is a father talking about his son, to destroy him. And if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible for one who believes. And so what I'm getting out of this cross-reference is how significant it is that the leper in our passage did not say, if you can make me clean. Or if you can, please make me clean. Rather, he says, if you will. And clearly, based on Jesus' response in Mark 9, here's a big difference between the two. One of them recognizes the sovereign choice of Jesus, if you will, if you're willing, and the other expresses unbelief and uncertainty in whether Jesus was able to, even if he wanted to. So we are not dealing with that unbelief in our passage. Rather, we're dealing with a leper who has faith. All right, footnotes, I didn't find much. Comparing the translations, I didn't see much of significance. So that brought me to searching. And before I look at the original language words, there was one English aspect that I wanted to search. And again, that relates to my question that I already mentioned about what are we supposed to think about leprosy. I didn't find any cross-references that were particularly helpful to me. There are a couple cross-references in this section about leprosy, but they didn't bring me to passages that dealt with what happens when a clean person touches an unclean leper. And so to find that, I did an English search for touch asterisk unclean. Thought that would get me what I want, and sure enough, I found in Leviticus 5 a passage that touches on this, no pun intended, touches on this reality. So if anyone sins in that he hears a public adjuration to testify, and though he's a witness, okay, he's dealing with some unintentional sins. If anyone touches an unclean thing, whether it's a carcass and so forth. And then verse 3, it says, or if he touches human uncleanness. So that would be our category of leprosy, or whatever sort of uncleanness may be with which one becomes unclean, and it is hidden from him when he comes to know of it and realizes his guilt. And then he gives another example after that. Verse 5, when he realizes his guilt in any of these and confesses the sin he has committed, he shall bring to the Lord as his compensation for the sin that he's committed a female from the flock, a lamb or a goat, for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him for his sin. So the situation here in Leviticus 5 is somebody has unintentionally come in contact with something unclean that they're not supposed to touch. And then they realize it, oh, oops, what did I do? And it's not called a mistake, it's called sin. Multiple times it requires atonement and an offering to be made. And it has guilt involved in it. All that was really significant for me as I was looking through this, because it made me realize all the more how edgy Jesus is here in stretching out his hand to touch this man. Now, the leprosy leaves him, and apparently Jesus doesn't become unclean. And certainly we know Jesus doesn't bear guilt and sin from this. We see that more broadly, but he pushes all the way up to the edge, and it just makes me think of the grander reality of how the Son of God has come all the way into the muck of our world, has become sin on our behalf in order to free us from this junk. He doesn't stay at an arm's length. He doesn't stay at shouting distance where the leper is supposed to cry, unclean, unclean. He goes right up to the edge and he touches the guy. And that floored me beforehand, but after seeing that passage in Leviticus 5, all the more. So all that by way of other things we've learned in this course. Now to the focus of this lesson. So I looked at a couple words here. The first would be leprosy, and it only appears 4 times in the Bible, and they all happen to be this story. So in Luke and then in the parallel passages is where we find, so 1 in Matthew, 1 in Mark, parallel passages, and then Luke, 2 verses in a row in the passage that we are looking at. So, that didn't help me very much. Coming back to the Strong's Concordance here, I do see it's from the same as lepis, but clicking on lepis, I discovered that this is just one of those cognates, those similar words within a language that we shouldn't push too far to understand. We can understand the connection once we know the definition of both. So it's a scaly substance, so leprosy, your skin falls off, it's flaky, but it doesn't really help us in understanding anything more about this leprosy. And we did have a footnote about the leprosy in the ESV, so it's a term for several skin diseases, and that's what pointed me to Leviticus 13, though Leviticus 13 didn't deal with touching somebody who's unclean, so that's why I searched over to Leviticus 5. Anyway, all that to say, I also searched the word leper, found there is a Greek word behind that. It appears, I believe, 9 times, but there wasn't much to come out of it. I think it's pretty plain as it is with the English translation and the ESV footnote. And so we're going to move on beyond that. So next I searched the word begged. And this did have some significance for me. It appears 151 times in the Bible, and so it's a very common word. So I wanted to look only in one of those concentric circles, I chose Luke. There are 23 results there. And so as I looked through these, one thing that certainly came out is the fact of this urgency that I must be in my Father's house. I must. Then you have that begged, like we have in our passage, and another time begged, I must, and so forth. You can see those are primarily the translations. When it comes to prayer, it's praying earnestly, ought. And so there's this, Satan bound. So there's this binding. There's, that's clearly part of the core meaning of the word. The non-figurative sense is to bind. And when that is applied to a request, like in our passage, certainly I can see all the more the urgency of it. In other words, certainly he's begging him. That's a strong word to start with. But it's as if this leper is saying, in addition to that, I must have you help me. I need this. I can't go on without it. So that begging is imploring with an urgency of that must sort of nature, that binding. Oh, please, as much as I can bind you with my request. And of course, the leper can't bind Jesus as if he has authority over him, but in that hyperbolic sort of way, he's saying, I'm saying anything I can to get you to help me with this. I'm doing anything I can, please. So again, the word begged in English does convey that, but all the more now as I've seen it filled out with those other usages. Finally, the word left, like I mentioned before, that just seems kind of strange to me how leprosy left him. And as I looked at this word, first of all, it comes from two Greek words, and so this one's the preposition, so I need the verb, I come or go away from, depart, return. Seems like a pretty straightforward, simple term, 118 times used frequently, and as I looked through the results in Luke, sure enough, it's a very common word, it would seem, to go away. And even later in this passage, when Jesus charges him and says, go and show yourself to the priest, he uses the same word. And so there don't seem to be any heavy connotations with this. It's just, it went away. All right, that was my little demo for you. Hopefully it gets you on the right tracks to look at verses 14 through 16 on your own.
This is unlike any study Bible you have ever seen. It might just plunge you into your own deeper study of Scripture. Go to Biblearc.com, the shape, not the boat, to download the Study Bible app and join the expedition as we explore the breadth and length and depth of Scripture.